Hello, VC. Greg back here again with my second review from the Deutsche Grammophon Original Source series. And this time I'm going to do a comparison between 6 different recordings of Sacre Du Printemps by Stravinsky. And unlike the last review, I will say right off the bat, this one is not as terrible as the first one. And also, I don't want to give like a long intro or babble too much in the beginning and ramble on, so I just want to like get into it. So the first recording that I listened to actually comes out of this box set, which is 9 masterpieces conducted by the composer, and this is put out on Columbia, which again generally I avoid. This recording though was originally put out on Phillips in 1960, and I don't have that original to compare it to, but if you look on Discogs, it's all 5 out of 5, for whatever that means. And it's on the silver and maroon Phillips label. It was later put out in the US on Columbia on a 6i, and there's a 2i also. And that recording I do not have. This one really sounds pretty great. It was recorded in New York by the Columbia Symphony Orchestra, which in New York is basically members of the LA Phil and a pickup band. And this, Stravinsky, by the time he's conducting this one, is pretty old. And, it doesn't have the same sort of veracity and intensity of any of the earlier versions, and I'm sure it's not how it sounded when he debuted it. But overall, it kind of has a more angular, avant-garde feel to it, which I actually really like. And it has a nice sound stage. It's a little echoey. It has a pretty like mid-hall sound to it, but it's really nice. It's great separation between the instruments. All of the plucked instruments and the pizzicatos really punchy and nice. Big percussion. I think all of them have pretty big percussion. And it comes on this label with the drawing of Stravinsky by Picasso, it's silver label. This box set, I think in the day, in 1970 when it came out, was some sort of kind of remastered audiophile edition. And overall, it sounds pretty great. The performance, again, is different than all the other performances. It's a little tamer and a little more interesting and slow. But that's just how Stravinsky perceived it at that time in his life, and that's, that happens. I mean, look at the Grateful Dead, a recording from 74 or 77 or 85, they're all going to sound radically different. And that's, the artist's own prerogative to do that. The second one that I have also comes from this box set. This is on Phillips, Haitink, Concertgebouw. The 3 great ballets, Rite of Spring, Petrushka, and the Firebird. If you have other 70s Haitink recorded at the Concertgebouw, they all sound kind of the same, and this one's no different. This one's cut pretty hot. It's really dynamic, super punchy, big percussion. And again, it just has a more passionate feel than the Stravinsky conducted one. It gets a little more rambunctious. It's hot though, it's very hot. The brass is really loud, like right on the border of almost being annoying. And in those full tutti sections, it almost breaks apart. But it's overall a decent recording. It wouldn't be my favorite that I would want to put on. Next up, I have this, which I will say this is Carillon doing it with Berlin Phil. And I don't even know why I still have this record. Not a huge Carillon fan, definitely not Carillon doing Stravinsky, but I will say that back in the day, maybe 20 years ago, you could go to Amoeba Records and the dollar classical section was maybe, I don't know, 25 bins of albums underneath the classical section. And you could get all the Deutsche Grammophon, the Londons, all of that stuff. Actually, I got a ton of my None Such Avant-Garde series and CRI Avant-Garde records there, all for $1, all in great condition. And this is just a leftover of that era. And the one thing I will say about this, it has that typical Deutsche Grammophon string tone where it's like, it's edgy, it's bright, it's not great. But the percussion on this version is amazing, like absolutely house-shaking percussion. I wish I could just remove the percussion from this version and insert it somewhere else because it's really, really great sounding. All of these records are coming in around the same time, except this one. This one, the first movement's 16 minutes, the second movement's about 18 and a half. So this is probably the slowest version. And outside of that massive percussion, I would say there's nothing really stand out or great about that version at all. This version, Answer May conducting the Swiss Roman. This is a London wideband pancake groove. This is from 1958, it's an original. This is the one, generally when I'm listening to albums, these bluebacks will almost always sound the best, or the way that I perceive a recording to sound the best. And this one, I cleaned it 2-3 times trying to get the best out of it, and it kind of just doesn't have it. It doesn't have that usual early Decca sound. And it's interesting, the SXL version goes for huge money and gets great reviews, and this one is cheap and doesn't get very good reviews at all. Maybe the hot stamper guy would say I just don't have a hot stamper version of this. But I am one of the people who is a firm believer that the SXLs from Decca and the CS from London are the same pressings, pressed at the same time. I don't see any difference in the recordings on the ones that I have from both. They sound exactly the same. This version is kind of distorted. It's a little distorted, it's a little narrow. The soundstage doesn't really go out. It doesn't have a great depth in it. The strings, though, sound really nice. Very, very nice string tone, like that, very, like Decca tree, very up close. Not my favorite, though. Not my favorite at all. Now we could get into, let's talk about this one, about the new reissue. I have kind of mixed feelings about this one. There's things about it that I really like and things that sound a little weird to me. And first off, I just want to say this is cut hot. And this is bombastic, rambunctious, which I think is originally how Stravinsky wanted this to be, a sort of overwhelming physical and emotional experience. This has that, but I think in the remixing and the transferring, I think it's cut so hot that really it's getting into like a lot of tape compression. You know, I think it's hitting the tape really hard, and I feel like I can hear a little head bump in that compression. You know, for you guys who don't know, like a tape machine essentially is a compressor. So a lot of times people will talk about, well, there were no compressors used on these recordings or whatever, but it's hitting the tape hard. So the harder you hit the tape, the more it's going to push down on the music, which allows you to get more volume because it's removing those transients, and the quieter sections can come up a little more. And I think that happens a lot, obviously, in recordings. And it really depends on what batch of tape you're using, what brand you're using, how many IPS you're recording at, how hard you hit it coming in, and then how hard you hit it on the master tape, or however it's done. But this to me definitely has that sound, that kind of compressed sound with the exaggerated bass. The sound stage is wide, you know. This is really everything in this recording. I mean, the big dynamic sections are huge, almost uncomfortably huge, which is not always how I like to enjoy classical music. You know, I'm not always trying to just be bludgeoned by it. And this recording definitely has that. On the flip side of what I'm talking about, a lot of those flutes, piccolos, clarinets, those things that are distant in a lot of these recordings, they're very forward and they sound really, really pretty and really nice. And it was really nice to be able to hear all of those winds and those kind of chattering sections up close and panned out wide, where you could really, really hear each instrument. The separation on this recording is fantastic. I like this record. I mean, it's one of those, like, if you're gonna have your friends over and you want to play your system loud and blow them away, this is a recording to do that. If you're trying to sit down and just listen to a nice, even, good sounding recording of this, this is not the version. I do like it though. I do like it. It just has some kind of, to me, to my ears, there's something that just sounds artificial about it. Like, this is not how, you know, a performance sounds when you go see a symphony orchestra live, which I do. It sounds almost more like a rock album or something. It's very, very punchy, very dynamic, very hot. But if you're into that, it's a great version to pick up. This one, This is the last one that I have, and I will say this is by far, to me, the best version of this. The best sounding. I like the performance. I saw, I don't know how long ago, Dave Hurwitz was saying that this recording was a hot mess, and the orchestra got away from the conductor, and it's sloppy. It's rambunctious for sure. I don't know if I would go to call it sloppy or any of that, but you know, again, I'm not listening to any of these recordings with the score in my lap. I'm not following along line by line. I'm just listening, you know? So, but this one, Pierre Monteux with the Paris Conservatoire, this is also from 1958. This version from Living Stereo, this is an original Shaded Dog. This one from top to bottom has parts of everything that make all of these other recordings sound good. It has the really nice percussion, good string tone. It's very even too. In some other recordings I feel like sections really pop out and come back and there's this sort of moving thing, and this kind of stays within a certain dynamic range, you know, of sections coming in and out. You know, if you envision in any way a conductor almost as like a mix engineer sliding faders of things in and out, this one doesn't get really ever too extreme. It's a nice, really balanced mix. The sound stage is great. This one actually is cut a little bit quiet, which I almost prefer. I would rather it be cut a little bit quiet and then allow me to use my system to adjust how loud I want it to be. It's very nice. It's a little distant. It doesn't have that super up close Decca sound, but on the flip side of that, the depth is really nice. You really get a sense of like the percussion is back here, the brass, the wood, you know, you can hear everything in its own section, in its own space. Really, really nice. This one, I would say if I just wanted to listen to a version of this, sit in my chair and just enjoy it, this would be the version I would go for out of all of the ones there. Really great. And you know, Monteux was the guy who originally premiered The Rite of Spring. He wasn't Stravinsky's first choice. I believe like Diaghilev was his first choice, but he was not available, and then he asked someone else. And I'm not going to get into the whole story, and then we all know what happened at the premiere. But that's all in there. And actually this box set, the last thing I will say, this 9 masterpieces reissue box has interviews with Stravinsky about each piece. And in this one he talks a lot about how he came up with the idea to write Sacre Du Printemps while he was writing the Firebird, and he finished the Firebird, and then he rented a house, I believe in Sweden, and wrote it there in about a month, and then took him about 4 more months to orchestrate it. And so for every piece in that box there is an interview with Stravinsky. There's actually an album in there, an audio interview with him from a radio program. But it's interesting. I'm not going to get into the whole thing about it. You know, again, you can look all of that up for yourself. I'm just sharing parts of my collection with you. So definitely this one is the nicest one that I have. I have had also a version, the Zubin Mehta, the LA Phil, recorded at Royce Hall. I had a London version of that. I don't have it anymore. I'm waiting to get a super analog disc version of that. I have a pretty good collection of the King super analog discs. And I just haven't found one for sale in America. They're all in Japan. And if I find one, I'll come back and do another review with that one involved in there, but my gut feeling tells me that one probably would be at the top of my list if I had it. Thank you for listening. I'm just starting out doing this, so if you could subscribe or like the video or leave a comment or offer comments about which versions you like the best, I think it would help get into the algorithm more and all of that, as I do have a lot of videos planned to record of some of my favorite recordings and things like that. So stay tuned for those. I'm going to try and make a video every few days and put it out. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.